The first hint something was wrong came when my online unemployment account showed a payment that never arrived in my mailbox. I'd been laid off from my marketing coordinator position 3 months earlier when the tech startup I worked for ran out of funding. The unemployment benefits were crucial for covering rent and basic expenses while I searched for new employment. I logged into the state unemployment system to check my payment history and saw that 3 weekly payments totaling $1,247 had been marked as processed and mailed over the past month. But I'd never received any of those checks. My apartment's mail delivery was reliable, and I'd been checking daily for the payments I desperately needed. My first assumption was postal service problems or administrative errors. I called the unemployment office customer service line and spent 45 minutes on hold before reaching Representative Maria Santos. Ms. Thompson, I show 3 checks mailed to your address on file, 1247 Oak Street, Apartment 2B. All 3 were cashed between 2 and 5 days after mailing. My blood ran cold. Cashed by whom? I never received those checks. Let me check. The endorsement signatures appear to match our records, but I can request copies of the canceled checks for your review. It typically takes 7 to 10 business days. I gave Maria my direct email address and requested expedited processing. Something was seriously wrong if checks were being cashed without my knowledge, and I needed those funds to avoid falling behind on rent. While waiting for the canceled check copies, I reviewed my mail situation carefully. I lived in a secure apartment building with locked mailboxes, and I'd never had delivery problems before. The only people with access to my mail were myself and my parents. 2 months earlier, I'd given my parents my apartment key so they could water my plants while I attended a friend's wedding out of state. They'd returned the key after I came back, but they could have made copies. More concerning, they'd insisted on picking up my mail during that weekend, claiming they wanted to help with anything important. My parents had been struggling financially since my father's hours were cut at the factory where he'd worked for 15 years. They'd been asking family members for temporary loans, and had hinted several times that I should be helping them more with expenses. I'd been contributing what I could despite being unemployed myself, but it was never enough in their opinion. The canceled check copies arrived via email on a Thursday morning, and what I saw made me physically sick. 3 unemployment checks made out to Sarah Thompson had been endorsed with signatures that were clearly not mine. Someone had attempted to forge my signature, but the handwriting was distinctly different from my actual endorsement style. More damning, the checks had been cashed at a check cashing store in my parents' neighborhood, 20 miles from my apartment. I'd never been to that area in my life, and I certainly hadn't cashed checks there. The timestamps showed the checks were cashed during weekday morning hours when I'd been at home applying for jobs. I called my parents immediately, hoping for an innocent explanation despite the obvious evidence. Mom, did you guys pick up any mail from my apartment recently? Some unemployment checks I was expecting never arrived. My mother's response was telling in its immediate defensiveness. Sarah, we haven't been to your apartment since you got back from that wedding. Are you accusing us of taking your mail? I'm not accusing anyone, Mom. I'm trying to figure out what happened to 3 unemployment checks that were mailed to me but cashed somewhere else. Well, maybe the post office made a mistake. You know how unreliable mail delivery can be these days. But postal mistakes don't explain forged endorsements and check cashing 20 miles away. I needed to gather more evidence before making any accusations. I requested additional documentation from the unemployment office and the check cashing store where my benefits had been stolen. The unemployment office provided detailed mailing records showing exactly when each check was sent and the addresses used. All checks had been correctly mailed to my apartment address. The check cashing store, Quick Cash Express, initially refused to provide information about the transactions. However, when I explained that I was investigating identity theft involving my unemployment benefits, Manager Robert Kim agreed to review their records. Ms. Thompson, I can see 3 checks cashed here over the past month. The person who cashed them showed ID and signed in our logbook. Our security cameras would have recorded the transactions. I asked for copies of the security footage and transaction records. Robert explained that they required either a police report or a court order to release surveillance footage to customers, but he could provide transaction timestamps and the identification information used. The identification used for cashing my unemployment checks belonged to someone claiming to be me, but the physical description in their records was completely wrong. The person who cashed my checks was described as white female, approximately 55 to 60 years old, 5 feet 4 inches height, brown hair. I was 28 years old, 5 feet 7 inches with blonde hair. When I pointed out the obvious discrepancy, Robert reviewed the records more carefully. This is concerning, Ms. Thompson. Our cashiers are supposed to verify that the person matches the ID they present. It looks like someone used fake identification or our staff didn't properly verify identity. I asked Robert to preserve all records and surveillance footage related to these transactions while I filed a police report for benefit theft. He agreed and flagged the account to prevent any future check cashing attempts. My next step was contacting the state unemployment fraud hotline. The intake specialist, Jennifer Walsh, listened to my situation and immediately recognized it as criminal benefit theft rather than administrative error. Ms. Thompson, unemployment benefit theft is a serious crime that we investigate aggressively. The fact that someone forged your endorsements and used false identification makes this a federal offense as well as state crime. Jennifer scheduled me for an interview with unemployment fraud investigator Detective Carol Martinez the following week. She advised me to gather all documentation and avoid confronting anyone I suspected until the investigation was complete. Detective Martinez specialized in unemployment fraud cases and had seen similar family theft situations before. Her office was in the state building downtown, and she reviewed my evidence with the methodical thoroughness of someone experienced in financial crimes. Sarah, the pattern you're describing is unfortunately common. Family members steal unemployment benefits because they know victims are financially vulnerable and less likely to pursue criminal charges against relatives. Detective Martinez explained that benefit theft carried serious penalties because unemployment funds were federally subsidized and strictly regulated. The forged endorsements constituted multiple felony charges, and the use of false identification added additional criminal violations. The security footage from the check cashing store will be crucial evidence. If we can identify the person who cashed your checks, we can build a strong criminal case. I shared my suspicions about my parents but emphasized that I wanted the investigation to be thorough and objective. Detective Martinez assured me that the evidence would determine the direction of the case, regardless of family relationships. The investigation moved quickly. Detective Martinez obtained the security footage from Quick Cash Express and reviewed the transactions where my unemployment checks had been stolen. The footage clearly showed my mother cashing checks that belonged to me, using what appeared to be fake identification. Sarah, I need you to positively identify the person in this security footage, Detective Martinez said during our follow-up meeting. Take your time and be certain. The footage was clear and devastating. My mother, wearing a blonde wig and glasses I'd never seen before, approached the counter with my unemployment checks. She presented identification to the cashier, signed documents and left with cash that belonged to me. That's definitely my mother, Linda Thompson, I confirmed. But she's disguised herself with a wig and glasses to avoid being recognized. Detective Martinez had additional evidence I hadn't expected. The fake identification my mother used had been traced to a document forgery operation that created fraudulent driver's licenses and state ID cards. My mother had paid $200 to obtain a fake ID with my name and her photograph. Your mother didn't just steal your unemployment checks, Sarah. She purchased fraudulent identification specifically to commit benefit fraud. This was a premeditated crime, not a desperate family emergency. The scope of the fraud expanded as the investigation continued. Detective Martinez discovered that my mother had also attempted to file fraudulent unemployment claims using my social security number and employment history. She'd been trying to obtain additional benefits beyond the ones she was already stealing. Your mother has been systematically exploiting your identity for financial gain, Detective Martinez explained. The unemployment theft was just one part of a larger fraud scheme. Bank records showed that my mother had deposited the stolen unemployment funds into her personal account, then used the money for personal expenses including credit card payments, utility bills and grocery shopping. There was no evidence that the stolen money had been used for emergencies or family necessities. When Detective Martinez interviewed my father, he initially claimed ignorance about the unemployment theft. However, bank records showed that he'd helped spend the stolen funds and had knowledge of my mother's fraudulent activities. Mr. Thompson admitted that he knew his wife was cashing checks that didn't belong to her, Detective Martinez reported. He claimed they thought you wouldn't mind helping family during a difficult time. But helping family requires consent and voluntary participation. Stealing someone's unemployment benefits through identity theft and forgery is criminal fraud, regardless of family relationships. The confrontation with my parents was inevitable once the investigation identified them as the perpetrators. I arranged to meet them at a restaurant with Detective Martinez present, both for safety and to ensure proper documentation of their responses. My mother's reaction when presented with the evidence was a mixture of defiance and victim blaming. "Sarah, you're living in that expensive apartment while your father and I are struggling to pay bills. We raised you and sacrificed for your education. The least you could do is help when we're in trouble. Mom, you stole my unemployment benefits using fake identification. That's not asking for help, that's committing fraud. We were going to pay you back once your father's hours increased. This is temporary borrowing, not stealing. But temporary borrowing requires permission and agreement. Taking someone's unemployment benefits through forged endorsements and fake identification is theft, regardless of intentions to repay. My father was more remorseful but equally misguided about the severity of their actions. Sarah, we never meant to hurt you. We're just desperate and thought you'd understand." Detective Martinez interrupted to read them their rights and inform them that criminal charges were being filed for unemployment fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The evidence was overwhelming, and their admissions during the restaurant meeting had been recorded. The criminal case proceeded rapidly due to the clear evidence and documented admissions. Prosecutor Rebecca Davis specialized in public benefit fraud and took the case seriously because unemployment theft undermines the entire social safety net system. The defendants systematically stole unemployment benefits intended to help their daughter during a period of job loss, Prosecutor Davis argued during the preliminary hearing. They used forged documents, fake identification, and fraudulent endorsements to steal government funds during a national economic crisis. My parents hired defense attorney Michael Rodriguez, who attempted to argue that this was a family financial emergency rather than criminal fraud. However, the premeditated nature of the crime, including purchasing fake identification and researching benefit fraud methods, undermined any emergency defense. The evidence against them was comprehensive. Security footage showed my mother committing the crimes. Bank records proved they'd spent the stolen money on personal expenses. Handwriting analysis confirmed the forged endorsements. The fake identification tied them to additional criminal charges. During plea negotiations, my parents finally acknowledged the seriousness of their actions. The potential federal charges and prison sentences motivated them to accept responsibility and agree to restitution. My mother pleaded guilty to unemployment fraud, identity theft, and forgery charges. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, followed by 2 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties. My father pleaded guilty to conspiracy and received probation with restitution obligations. The restitution covered not only the stolen unemployment benefits but also the costs of my credit monitoring, legal consultations, and financial damages from delayed benefit payments. The court also ordered them to stay away from my apartment building and mail delivery areas. The financial impact of the theft had been severe. Without those unemployment payments, I'd fallen behind on rent and had to borrow money from friends to cover basic expenses. The stress of financial insecurity while job searching had been overwhelming, made worse by knowing my own parents were responsible for my hardship. The unemployment office expedited replacement payments once the criminal case confirmed the theft, but the weeks without benefits had created a cascade of financial problems. I'd had to use credit cards for necessities, take a temporary retail job at reduced pay, and delay important expenses like car maintenance and medical appointments. More devastating was the betrayal of trust. My parents had exploited my period of unemployment, when I was most financially vulnerable, to steal government benefits intended to help me survive job loss. They'd prioritized their financial convenience over my basic survival needs. The investigation also revealed that this wasn't their first attempt at benefit fraud. Detective Martinez discovered that my mother had previously filed fraudulent claims using my sister's information when she'd been unemployed 2 years earlier. My sister had never reported the theft because she'd found employment quickly and hadn't realized the benefits were being stolen. Your mother appears to have a pattern of exploiting family members during their vulnerable periods, Detective Martinez explained. She specifically targets relatives who are unemployed or facing financial stress. This pattern suggested that my parents viewed their children's government benefits as family resources they could access without permission. The systematic nature of their fraud indicated criminal thinking rather than desperate emergency responses. The civil restitution process took several months to complete. Beyond the direct theft amounts, I was entitled to damages for financial stress, credit impacts, and the costs of securing my mail and identity. The total restitution exceeded $4,000, including penalties and administrative costs. My parents struggled to make the restitution payments, which created additional family tension. They'd expected me to forgive the debt or accept reduced payments, but the court-ordered restitution was legally enforceable regardless of family relationships. "Sarah, you're financially destroying your own parents over money you've already gotten back from the state," my mother complained during one phone call before I changed my number. But the restitution wasn't about the money. It was about accountability and ensuring they understood the serious consequences of benefit fraud. The financial penalties were designed to deter future crimes and compensate victims for the full impact of fraud. The employment impact was significant but manageable. Some potential employers were concerned about the family criminal case during background checks, but most were sympathetic when I explained that I'd been the victim rather than perpetrator of fraud. My current employer, a digital marketing agency, was actually impressed by how I'd handled the situation. "Sarah, the way you documented evidence and worked with investigators shows exactly the kind of analytical thinking we value," my supervisor explained during my performance review. "The experience taught me valuable lessons about financial security and family boundaries." I moved to a new apartment with more secure mail delivery and implemented comprehensive identity monitoring to prevent future fraud attempts. I also established firm financial boundaries with all family members. Any requests for money now require formal documentation, clear repayment terms, and transparent accountability. I never again provide access to my personal information or financial documents. The relationship with my parents remains strained but has slowly improved as they've completed their legal obligations and demonstrated changed behavior. My mother completed financial counseling as part of her probation, which helped her understand the impact of benefit fraud on victims and social programs. My father returned to full-time work and has been making consistent restitution payments without complaints. His willingness to take responsibility and make amends has helped rebuild some trust, though our relationship will never return to its previous level. I've become an advocate for unemployment fraud victims, particularly those exploited by family members. The assumption that benefit theft by relatives is less serious than fraud by strangers is harmful and legally incorrect. I've spoken at unemployment fraud prevention workshops, sharing my experience to help others recognize signs of benefit theft and understand the importance of reporting crimes regardless of family relationships. The State Unemployment Office has implemented stronger identity verification procedures partly in response to cases like mine. They now require photo identification and additional documentation for benefit claims, making it harder for fraudsters to steal benefits. Most importantly, I learned that family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior, and that protecting yourself from fraud sometimes requires prosecuting relatives. The legal system treated my case seriously because unemployment fraud undermines public assistance programs that help people during economic crises. Today, my finances are stable, my career is thriving, and I'm legally protected from further benefit fraud through ongoing monitoring and security measures. My parents completed their criminal sentences and continue making restitution payments as ordered by the court. The unemployment fraud conviction will remain on their criminal records permanently, affecting their ability to obtain employment, housing, and credit. These long-term consequences serve as ongoing deterrents to future fraud attempts. While the family dynamics were permanently altered, my financial security and trust in public assistance programs were completely restored through the criminal justice process. Sometimes protecting yourself and the integrity of social safety net programs requires treating family members as the criminals they've chosen to become. The fraud investigation also led to broader enforcement actions against the document forgery operation that provided my mother's fake identification. Several other fraud cases were solved through evidence discovered during my investigation, helping protect additional victims from identity theft. The experience reinforced my belief that unemployment benefits serve a crucial function in helping people survive job loss and economic transitions. Protecting these programs from fraud, even by family members, ensures they remain available for legitimate recipients who depend on them during vulnerable periods.